Our planet Earth, a world of mystery and imagination, science and wonder, that is constantly being gazed upon and unraveled by the finest minds humanity has to offer. Welcome to the UniV podcast, the show that presents a free-flowing conversation with those beings at the very center of the world of academia and research from all around the globe, with your host, Simon-Holland.
Hello and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Simon-Holland, and today on the UniV podcast, we talk to Professor Alex Greenwood, who is the head of the Department of Wildlife Diseases at the Leibniz Institute for Zoo and Wildlife Research in Berlin, Germany. He also holds a faculty position in the Department of Veterinary Medicine at the Freie Universität Berlin. He studied biology at Cornell University before entering in the PhD program in human genetics at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, where he was awarded his PhD in 1996. Alex is known for his specialization in ancient DNA and RNA, and has to date contributed numerous papers in the field of evolutionary biology, wildlife biology, molecular evolution, and evolutionary genetics, amongst others. He recently appeared on the captivating documentary How to Clone a Woolly Mammoth, produced by the Smithsonian Channel, that investigated a world of cutting-edge science on the brink of a major genetic breakthrough. Professor Alex Greenwood, we welcome you to the show.
Hi, Simon.
Hey, thank you very much for speaking with us today on the podcast. On the way here, I saw a student wearing a Jurassic Park t-shirt. Should I take that as a good omen in this conversation?
Well, Pleistocene Park, maybe. Mammoths are more recent than T-Rexes and all the other animals in that, which actually was a misnamed movie anyway, since half the animals that were in that weren't from the Jurassic.
But yeah, I've been hearing that. Is that something that drives you nuts?
No, I mean, well, a little bit. The accuracy of science presentation in movies is usually pretty bad. I know some people get a lot more upset about it than me, including a mammologist who in 10,000 BC, they made the mammoths about 5 times larger than any mammoth that ever existed. And his beef with that as a mammologist is the animals are big enough and impressive without having to make them unrealistically large. So he didn't really understand what the motivation was there. With Jurassic Park, they just wanted all these different dinosaurs together, but T-Rex would not have seen most of the dinosaurs it was eating in those movies because it came much later.
Is it? Yeah, because it's a fine line between trying to trigger imagination, Hollywood style, and getting the facts right. The facts aren't boring, exactly like you said about the mammologist. Like the facts themselves aren't boring at all, are they?
No, I think that's what frustrates most scientists, is that the facts aren't boring, so it doesn't always make sense to then completely alter them and turn it into pure fantasy. For that, why not then just have dragons and unicorns and all the other stuff that you would have in a Tolkien film, which is fun to watch too, but then you don't have to try to, part of the time, adhere to any kind of fact. You just make a science fiction movie.
Now, some parts of that film because I guess the good lie, they say, impinges on the truth and, steals bits of the truth. What part of that film is legit, and how's that similar to what you guys are trying to do there?
I would say pretty much none of it is legitimate.
Oh, okay. Then.
On the grounds that the molecules, DNA, that you would need has never been retrieved or confirmed or retrieved from samples that old. So there's never been confirmable DNA retrieved from amber. There's definitely been none retrieved from fossil dinosaurs. The problem with dinosaur fossils is they aren't actually bones of a dinosaur. They're mineral imprints of a bone of a dinosaur that died tens of millions of years ago. So there is no DNA there. There's no bone there. So you're not going to get dinosaur DNA out of it. Mm-hmm. But just for the sake of argument, let's say there is a bone out there somewhere that does have DNA in it. Up till now, the ability to clone wild animals, even that we know or have in our own hands right now, has been really miserable.
Yeah.
The success is very, very low. And that's starting with eggs and sperm and full genomes. And anything you get from a dinosaur would be thousands of times poorer quality with no reference either. So, the idea of cloning a mammoth is you use an elephant as the mother for gestation, but what would you gestate where would the eggs develop in a dinosaur? So it's a nice fantasy idea, and the amber idea was great as a science fiction tool, but it's not really based on anything from what we're dealing with in current facts. And that's why I think Jurassic Park is less what people are focused on, and it's more people talking about bringing back more recently extinct animals like mammoths or the Tasmanian tiger, and animals where there's more available biomolecules. So you can get mammoth DNA, you can get Tasmanian tiger DNA relatively easily. So I think that's where more of the focus is.
And do you think that it's maybe a misguided appropriation of this technology to try and bring back these ancient species versus conserving what we already have?
I wouldn't call it misappropriation, but I think that's right. I mean, if you take rhinos and modern elephants, they're declining right now because there's a market for their tissues. And so you've got poachers going out and slaughtering them. So, and it's been amazingly unsuccessful, the efforts in stopping this. So we have all these major species declines of what we have. For me, what's the cloning or bringing back species going to achieve? If you can't save the ones that are here now with international efforts, what's going to be the fate of animals you bring back, which don't even have an environment to bring them back to? So, bringing a woolly mammoth back as a circus freak is not, I wouldn't list that as a conservation effort. It's more of because we could do it type of effort. So in that regard, I'm not really in favor of it. I think as a pure scientific effort, trying to figure out how to piece together old genomes and bring back even cells from an extinct animal would be interesting. You could learn a lot about them in that regard. But I don't really look at it as a true conservation effort, which is how it's very often sold. I'm
not really in the business of quoting Hollywood movies in science conversations, but we saw a situation in that movie War of the Worlds where the aliens came into the world and then ended up dying of the flu, because of the flu. If you brought something back from the past, it would really struggle in this new environment, wouldn't it? And part of the work that you do is on viral properties of these ancient species.
Yeah. I mean, one problem is if you bring them back, people usually clone of them from different sources. There won't be very much genetic variation, and who knows what they're susceptible to. So mammoths went extinct about 3,000 years ago. They were in the mainland. It was 10,000 years ago, but on some of the islands like Wrangel Island and some islands in Alaska, there were still mammoths around. But the pathogen content of the environments has changed pretty drastically in the meantime. So it's not really clear they would survive. I doubt they would be carrying anything themselves because the whole cloning process is coming from single cells, and there shouldn't really be anything of the ancient pathogens left in them. But yeah, they could be very susceptible in the same way that, which isn't actually unique to this sort of science fiction idea. If you have captive breeding colonies of animals that are rare or extinct in nature, and you want to release those animals back into the wild, you also face sometimes cases where your breeding colony may not have what it takes to survive in the wild anymore. And there's always the risk that you send your animals out and then they all get infected by other animals in the environment, and it's unsuccessful.
Now, you've been doing a bit of work with retroviruses, really ancient retroviruses. And do you think that's a part of the extinction process? I mean, there's a lot of theories between being hunted. They only existed, like you said, 10,000 years ago on the mainland. But what about the viral side of things as a sort of a theory and understanding of why they died out?
Well, I'm doubtful that I can imagine cases where retroviruses could cause an extinction in an animal that's already suffering. So we're doing a lot with koala retroviruses and looking at how an invading retrovirus is shaping koala biology. Whether it causes extinction there's some question about that. There's probably other things that are causing more problems for koalas than retroviruses. But the idea of pathogens in general, whether it's viral, bacterial, or parasite, we are exploring, particularly with mammoths and muskoxen, which lived in the same area, but unlike mammoths survived. We are exploring the idea that at the time when we transitioned from the Pleistocene to what's now the Holocene, there were also major environmental changes. And these major environmental changes included retraction of the ice sheets that were covering much of the world at the time. And what this could allow is populations that have been separated for long periods of time to suddenly become reconnected, including reservoirs of viral diseases and bacterial diseases that would now be able to cross into territories where they wouldn't have been before. And what we think might have happened is you would have had introduction of these diseases into new populations, which would have had severe consequences for particularly the bigger animals, which have slow reproductive rates. And you can think of it as like when the conquistadors went to Central and South America, they actually, through warfare, killed less people than they did through disease. That's sort of like the typhoid Mary principle. You're in a population that's been exposed to a lot of disease and adapted to them for a long time. You show up somewhere that's been very isolated, you can kill everybody with diseases that we just think of as common childhood nuisances, but which have unbelievably bad consequences for a population that's never been exposed to them. And it's actually a concept that Ross McPhee of the American Museum of Natural History coined, called hyperdisease.
When you're looking at the scale of these kind of activities for extinction, what do you learn about the Earth and its ability to sort of, I guess, level the playing field if things get out of whack?
For obvious reasons, there's a negative connotation of extinction, but extinction is also part of life, and way more things have gone extinct than have actually evolved into new things. So extinction is actually the more common event than creation of new lineages, species, or whatnot. And what I think in extinction, when people think about extinction, we really have to make a distinction between natural extinction. So there are just species there that don't compete as well, or lineages or groups that don't compete as well in a given environment than others. And so one will become more prevalent and the other may just disappear. And this happens all the time. It happens in bacteria, it happens in viruses, it happens in birds, mammals, and whatever. And it's been happening ever since there were any of these organisms, which is a distinct kind of extinction than the one that most people who are thinking about conservation or worrying about human impacts on the world are thinking about, which are those that we're causing. So it's different than, so there were many species of koalas before, not just the ones you're familiar with, and all but one are extinct. And it's probably not because of people. So the koalas we have today are the lucky winners of this evolutionary lottery. But it's different than, say, what's happening now, where building highways or settlements in areas where koalas would live remove their ability to survive, because it's not that they're failing to compete as koalas, they're just being driven out by preventable human impacts. And I think that has to be distinguished, because in the one case, you want to stop poachers from killing rhinos, because that's not really a natural event. That's an economically driven, pretty barbarous market that's developed. It's different than if one rhino species was pushing out another one because it just had a higher reproductive rate, was more resistant to diseases, because then you're interfering in a natural process. So if you think, going back to the aliens, if the aliens would have time machines and go back and make sure that no dinosaurs went extinct, then we wouldn't be here either.
Yep.
Because you'd have some some artificial force preventing something that in principle shouldn't be able to compete and knocking out things that would have been better suited to their environment in the natural process. So